Greetings, everyone. I am very thrilled to be back in conversation with my friend and colleague, Irene Chong. And we're going to be talking today about how we, in this critical time of change, can be in alignment with our soul selves and on our own unique path of creativity. So, before we begin our conversation, for those of you who may not be familiar with my earlier conversations with Irene, let me just remind you that she is an amazing coach, mentor, creative consultant. She's the founder of Alignment Journeys, and in particular, is really on a mission to support women in aligning with their true selves and tapping into their unique creativity, intuition, and the fullness of their gifts. And you really walk your talk, Irene. So I'm glad to have you here today to talk about how we can be on this path of creativity and also to talk some about this program that you're launching that's really designed, a 6-month program called Treasure, designed to support women in being on that path. But thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me, Heather. It's always such a pleasure and a delight to be in conversation with you. So, hmm, heart full of gratitude.
Well, and before we start talking about this in a larger sense, you're personally on the threshold of a huge change with making a move from Thailand to Europe, listening to your own inner guidance, following your own creative path. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that's bringing up for you?
Sure. So many people have spoken of 2025 as being a threshold year, and that was really the word that came through. We have clearly the outer planets making that change, right? Transiting to a new sign. So on a collective and then also on a personal, individual level, so many of us are going through a transitional phase or stage in our lives. And when we are aligned to our soul selves, we receive these nudges and messages that don't always make sense to the rational mind. But when we really trust and we listen to that still inner voice, we cannot help but follow its directive. Not to say that it's a compulsory command or anything, but it's just so clear that we are pulled and drawn by what our higher selves are calling us to do. So that's what I'm currently in the process of, and I'm flying off in less than 2 weeks now at the time of this recording. And it's just been a very beautiful confirmation and affirmation as well, because when synchronicities land, when they come, I really see them as gifts from the universe to, some people call them breadcrumbs, signs that we are on the right track. And all I can say is that sometimes on the 3D level, they don't always make sense. There are struggles, obstacles, and challenges. And sometimes even the question will come up like, is this really worth it? Is this truly what I'm meant to do? Why are there these obstacles in the way? Why isn't everything going as smoothly or flowing as well as they should? And that was, I would say, a huge part of my experience in life. But after I came to value, I would say truly value myself from the inside out, it no longer mattered what was going on in the external, because there is so much noise and distraction these days. And it's very easy to get pulled out of our center. So time and time again, I've fallen back on the practices and the tools that I use to help me get back in alignment. Um, and, thank you for highlighting the program that is a huge labor of love for me, that I feel it's a combination of all the years of my own personal work experience, as well as my former career as a school teacher who specialized in curriculum design. I felt that I feel so grateful to finally be able to put this gift out to the world. I guess this is me sharing my gift and feeling really honored and privileged to be able to put this out. And also, when I look back at how it all began, how my entire alignment journey began, it was very much trusting and heeding the call following those nudges, not knowing always where it would lead me to, and sometimes not even quite believing that I would get there. So it was very much a step-by-step process. And like I mentioned, always coming back into alignment. When things went awry, it would just be a check-in, like, why is this happening? What is it that I need to tend to? What is it that I need to look at? And so as the time is converging and it's time for me to leave, I have been sitting in a heart full of gratitude and appreciation because despite the challenges, despite the struggles, it all feels so worth it in the end. It's something that to me is truly priceless. It's beyond compare when we have that inner knowing that we are being rewarded for following our unique path. Yeah.
Mm, so beautifully said, Irene. There's so many threads in that I would like to follow. But let me just start with, I think what you're saying about your own journey right now is a microcosm of the macrocosm that I talk a lot in my videos, not only about how we're moving into the Aquarian age, and you're right, 2025 is such a critical year of transition. And it also involves our moving out of the Kali Yuga as of March. We're coming out of this period of being caught in disconnection, not in alignment with our deeper selves as humanity, to now being in this liminal time, this time of transition and transformation. And I think it is so key in the midst of that, that we are each in our own process to connect with our hearts, which is the way to tune into our soul selves, to know how to be in harmony with the cosmos, to follow our own unique paths. And as you said, it's not always easy because we're stepping out of consensual reality and all those external expectations and all those pressures that would say you're being on the right path when you're achieving certain goals and accomplishing certain things and clear about the trajectory you're on. And I think we both know from our own experiences of stepping more and more into being in alignment with our deeper selves, with our soul selves, that it's a journey where you don't always know where you're headed. And you're sometimes following this inner guidance in ways that those caught in external reality, it might seem crazy. And yet there is such a sense, and I think you're talking about this, of inner joy and peace, even in the midst of the turmoil of being in those changes, when you know I'm actually living in alignment with my soul self.
Mm, yes, and that for me is the true treasure that we're all aiming for. I think external reality, societal pressures, and all that would have us believe that true success or true wealth is something altogether different and it's outside of us. But that is clearly a distorted truth. And I love what you're talking about here when you mentioned at the beginning that we are all fractal expressions of cosmic consciousness. And this piece is something that I feel very strongly about because a lot of the times, given the turmoil that's going on around us, I'll hear people saying, how dare you be happy amidst all this suffering? Or how dare you even pursue certain goals that you have when there's war going on? And I keep coming back to this idea of, well, if we are not at peace in ourselves, within ourselves, if we are not filled up from within, how can we serve, contribute, and give freely and truly of ourselves? And so this tending to oneself. Again, you mentioned at the beginning that I work primarily with women. And the reason for that is because I have my own devotional path to the divine feminine. But also, I find that so many women, this is such a common thread, they tend to disown their gifts and also feel that it's not right to care for themselves and that their role is mainly as a giver rather than as a receiver. And when that happens, there's actually a stagnation. There is no flow. There is no reciprocal exchange with the universe. And then, the limitations and the restrictions ensue. So this path, of really owning your desires, your dreams, your gifts, and feeling that it's perfectly okay to shine bright and radiate your light, because that is being of service. Again, sometimes consensual reality, as you put it, will say things like, you ought or you should be doing something else to be of service, versus looking after yourself. But if we are, when I look at our inner landscape and caring and tending to, I like to use the metaphor of a garden, when we tend to our own inner garden and make sure that everything is flourishing and thriving, then the energy with which we interact with the world, with which we interface community, people, etc., the work that we do, then that energy really ripples out in a very positive and healthy way. And since, the work that we do is very much on the energetic level, we truly believe that everything begins with energy and energetics. So I feel that this is a big missing piece in a lot of education out there. And because of my former experience as an educator, I wanted to bring back online the kind of education that I feel is truly needed, especially in this Aquarian age, where it's both, I think the way you put it is the individual rising together with the collective. And we do this together. As one person rises, we up-level the frequency of the collective as well. And then we have that beautiful ripple effect. So yeah, having said that, I'm just sitting with the kind of joy that we were talking about of being able to do this work, to live our purpose, to be in alignment with our higher selves.
Well, and part of what you're talking about, and you've stepped out of being in education in a very left brain way. And a big part of what you're talking about, what you're living and what you're teaching in your program, is how do we come back to the heart? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I do also want to say that I don't see anything necessarily wrong with the mind. So the mind is what gets us to discern duality. And we do need a mind. So we've had a conversation about this where I spoke about my past experiences and trying to shut my mind out and realizing that that was not going to work for me. And also a lot of the women whom I tend to work with, they have highly intelligent, brilliant minds, right, at the top of their fields with PhDs and doctorates and things like that. And it's not necessarily about pushing aside the mind. It's simply about making sure that the heart comes into coherence with the mind. So if you have a strong mind, then the key is to have a strong heart to bring it into balance. And I talk about the 3 divine feminine centers. So our inner vision, the intuition, the heart Taurus, and making that strong and bright. And then also the womb wisdom and being centered and anchored in our wombs. So these 3 centers, making sure that they are strong and aligned. Like that, to me, is the whole premise of the work that I do. So sometimes I might focus on one particular piece, but it's really about bringing all into alignment and balance and harmony so that they work together. So that, what I feel in my heart, my mind is now able to process and make sense of it. So that helps with the left brain logical piece. I'm now able to articulate and express myself confidently, consciously, rather than just go, I don't know, I just have a feeling. I'm now able to express it and stand in my truth. Because a lot of the time, communication is important. And so much of that is done verbally. So as part of my mission as an educator is to be able to articulate and express some of these concepts that are very much feeling and knowing based and helping to make it more accessible through language, through thought. So that heart coherence piece, it is something that needs to be experienced. But sometimes the entryway into it for a lot of people, and there are different entryways for this, right? But for most of the women that I work with, they need to have an understanding first for them to then surrender and go with the flow of whatever is arising. Because if it's unfamiliar and it's new, and one of the things that I do talk about, because I used to study neuroscience, is a strong need for safety, which I don't think should be dismissed. A lot of the work that we both do is trauma informed. And given how much trauma there is rippling out in the world out there, it's really important to feel safe. And sometimes it's important for the mind to feel intellectually safe in order to drop down into the heart and into the womb space. So that's my understanding.
There's so many layers to this that I'd like to dive into more deeply with you. But one I think is that you're talking about with heart coherence, and we can come into that process of heart coherence through understanding the steps and why it's important. But I think, and I know that this is part of your program and part of your teaching, is when we're in that heart coherence, it's really allowing the brain and the mind not to be suppressed or split off, but to be entrained by the heart. And it's also an integration. And I think this is some of what's important for us as women, as well as everyone, as we're in this movement into the age of Aquarius, to realize our right brain ways of knowing are as important as our left brain ways of knowing. So that left brain part of us is good at analyzing things, and yet the right brain part is more holistic, more relational, more intuitive, more able to see the connection, the interconnections of all that is. And I think part of what's so powerful about heart coherence, but also the work of people like Ian McGilchrist, who talks about the master and his emissary. And he's also written these recent books, I don't know if you've seen them, called The Matter with Things, which is a brilliant description of how we've gotten, as humanity, so caught in the idealization of the left brain that it's gotten us caught in these dynamics of separation and competition and analysis, but losing that sense of connection. And that as we connect more with our right brains and connect more with our hearts, then the left brain can be in service to that rather than the master of our lives. And this is what brings us into alignment, which is so much of what you teach and talk about. But also, one of the things you're talking about is how trauma can block us from that. And that a critical part of stepping into alignment with our deeper selves and with our creativity is how do we clear the blocks of trauma? So I know that's a critical part of your work and what you've woven into this program, Treasure.
Yeah, I love that you use the word entrainment because that's exactly what we're doing right in our work. When we teach or when we share a transmission, it comes from the heart. So there's an energy that's created, and I'm sure your audience is well aware that the heart generates a magnetic field that is far greater and more powerful than the brain. And there's so much good work out there. Heart math is the one that immediately comes to mind that has managed to articulate and communicate in very scientific terms the power of the heart and the importance of coming into heart coherence. So all this being said, all this information is out there. Why is it so difficult? If all of us knew it, why wouldn't we be sitting in a beautiful heart presence the whole time? And the key to that, as you've rightly pointed out, is because so many of us have become disconnected due to traumas, micro, macro, whatever term you want to put it. But so many of us have these fragmented selves. And what tends to happen when we encounter trauma is that we tend to go into our minds and we find a way to make sense of it. So there are all these, I would say, mental programmings that we've either inherited through our family line or, that we have been conditioned by society, by education, etc. And the wiring is so strong that it's hard to repattern and to rewire. And there are many programs out there that talk about using the mind to repattern. But since the heart generates a much more powerful field, the key here is really to find a way to step into heart coherence safely, gently, to feel the power of that, and then begin to start healing. So the first step in treasure is excavate. So we first step into a place of heart coherence, feeling safe in our wombs as well. And then we work with the mind. And to me, it's not so much, there are a lot of these terms that they use in neuroscience, right? Rewiring. I think with the divine feminine, so much of what I feel into is that it's actually a dissolving and a melting away, which I feel happens very easily and effortlessly. But in order for that to happen, in order to soften, we have to feel safe. Otherwise, we'll contract and we'll tense up. So because that was my personal experience in doing this work, I now see the importance of holding that kind of field and that space for the women that I serve, that in order for them to go where they need to go, which are often uncomfortable and difficult places because they have to excavate and confront past trauma that obviously has been suppressed, right? For defensive reasons. In order to go there, it's not so much about pushing or butting your way through. It's about feeling safe enough to soften, to let go, and then letting whatever needs to arise be released and healed. And once that can move, then they can step into an elevated frequency, which is what the second step is all about. Yeah.
Some of what's, I think, so key in what you're describing, Irene, and we both weave this into our work, is the importance of being in sacred circle together. Men and women, or in your case, with the work you do, circles of women. And it's in that context of being in sacred circle that we can begin to feel safe. We can begin to feel we're in a context where our true selves are mirrored back to us, and we can open more to that experience of being in a community, a loving, caring community, to internalize that experience of self-love. Because as you're talking about, when we have trauma, we build up these blocks or these patterns to protect ourselves that then constrict us from our true selves. And a lot of times, those patterns are operating unconsciously, but they're controlling us. And we can't really drop into our deeper selves until we clear those patterns and those blocks and feel safe to take in that experience of love and learn to love ourselves. So I think that's a beautiful part of what you're describing, is how being in sacred circle can support us to be in that sacred space together, to open to the love of the cosmos, the love of the earth, and emanate that safety with and for each other.
The other piece that I'd like to add to that is that we don't know what we don't know. And a lot of the time, there is this misguided understanding that, oh, we need to be doing something. We need to be fixing. We constantly need to be in motion and in movement and doing things. But when we're in sacred circle, it's really just the gift of presence and of being. And that is something that can seem very counterintuitive to the mind. Because when we think, okay, I have a problem, I need to find a solution. I need to fix it. I need to find a way. And then so we keep searching and doing, and we think that in the doing, we will arrive at some place. But the power of the being, which is so much a principle of the sacred feminine. And so these sacred circles, time and again, this is what I witness in the circles I facilitate. It's just women who show up and they don't have to do anything. They're just there to receive, right? To receive being in a circle. The only action they needed to take was to show up. So I've had, experiences with women who have shared that they are scared of being around other women. Again, because there's so much feminine wounding still that needs to be healed and processed. And so these women will later share with me that they have shied away from coming for circles, but they gave it a go and they feel really held. Or I have women who will share that they've never ever come on camera before when they come for these circles. So again, the fear of being seen, visibility wounds, right? But they suddenly feel called to come on camera and share, and knowing that they'll be witnessed. So a lot of the medicine, if you will, takes place just by them being present and not feeling that they have to do anything or to perform or show up in any way. Because what happens is that we co-weave this, it's a field of coherence where they're safe, where the divine feminine presence is so strong that that is healing in and of itself. And it is always such a joy and a privilege to be able to hold spaces like that, because I was very much once upon a time in their shoes. Whatever they're sharing, I have been through it. So it feels so wonderful to now share the medicine that I have myself received. Yeah.
I love your description of that, of what that energy is of a sacred circle. Um, because in my experience of it, you're together, as you said, weaving this sacred space and together attuning to the spirits of the circle and the energies that are there supporting us in our journeys. And I love the feminist theologian Nell Morton's description of a circle that we hear each other into speech. So it's really about coming from the heart, coming to truly see and hear each other, and that then allows us to more fully speak our deeper truth, drop into our true selves. And it is such a healing, transformational experience in and of itself to be in that sacred space and feel seen and heard, which allows us then to, as you so beautifully said, dissolve the blocks and the ways that we've suppressed or constricted ourselves to begin to open more to our true selves. And I think that that is such a critical part of the healing that we're all in right now in this transition time, is breaking out of separation, breaking out of conflict, breaking out of survival mentality to step more and more into our hearts, into our true selves. And as you said so beautifully a little bit ago, that's what supports the healing of the world. If we're coming from that place, from the heart, emanating that love and healing energy out, then we're impacting everyone around us and the morphogenic field of the planet. That helps transform the world.
Mm. What's coming through is this, I love to work with symbol and sacred geometry. So when I developed Treasure, and that was such a beautiful process of just tuning in, being in alignment with what wanted to come through, was the symbol of the pearl, which is interesting. And it does cohere well with Treasure. So one of the pieces that I would like to share was that, there is so much metaphor that helps us to understand the processes we're going through. And a really popular one is that of diamond consciousness, which is a beautiful metaphor in and of itself, that, when we are put under pressure, as planet Earth is currently experiencing, then when we either break or we become the strong diamond. And I like that metaphor, but somehow when it came to the divine feminine work that I was doing, there was just something that didn't feel quite in alignment. And I was wondering why. And obviously, as I was developing the material for Treasure, treasure as a word, right? I was trying to find the right symbol for it. And what kept coming through was the pearl. So when I started, it started off with a heart intuitive nudge. And then when I started to use my left brain and process why it was that the pearl was such a useful symbol, well, then it became clear, because what happens is that in that very inner stage, right inside of the oyster, you have that piece of grit or that irritant, trauma or wounding, whatever you want to call it. How does it transform? what is the process of inner alchemy that takes place that enables a piece of grit to turn into a lustrous, iridescent pearl? And I just love the medicine that Mother Nature provides. And then when the pearl is formed, one piece of trivia that I discovered was that just like snowflakes, no two pearls are ever alike,
Mm.
even if it comes from the same oyster. So there's something very unique and special about each pearl that is cultivated and formed. And what is beautiful about a pearl is that, I mean, it is so feminine. When I think of Venus, the symbols of the divine feminine, I keep coming back to pearl medicine. There is this radiance that it has, this glow. And I see it very much as a metaphor of the light that we each hold and that we have to offer as a precious gem, as a precious gift to the world. But it all begins from the inner, right? When I think of the oyster, and then when it's ready to open, then it can offer that gift to the world. And again, I'm also reminded that so many beautiful associations with pearls, pearls of wisdom. Like I'm wearing a pearl necklace right now. And what I love about it is that, again, when I think of the sacred feminine and the weaving that takes place, it's when each individual expression, each woman who arises and shines her light, and then together we co-weave and we create this beautiful thread that goes out into the world. And that really is the medicine that is so needed right now.
So much of your mission is to honor that energy of the sacred feminine, to support women in deepening their connection to that. And as you know, so much of my work is about how, in this time of transition, for all of us as humanity to move into wholeness, we need to reweave the sacred feminine with the sacred masculine. We need to honor those energies of the sacred feminine that have been suppressed and devalued across the last 5,000 years. But tell me, how would you describe the meaning of the sacred feminine? What does that mean to you?
Wow, that is a question that is so hard to put into words. I think the first thing that I'll share is that I have a remembrance of lifetimes of devotion to the sacred feminine. It is so much a part of my soul path that it's hard to separate it out from who I am. I do believe that as an energetic, it is in every person, every human being. What I see about the sacred feminine also is that it is creation, it is creative life force, and it holds. I see it as a very holding, loving force that without it, nothing can grow, nothing can come into being. And of course, we need to bring the sacred masculine in as well. But the sacred masculine often comes in its healthy expression as a protector and as a provider because it understands its place and its position. So it's not so much a power over, but a power with. And there is no one energetic that is in dominance. I think the problem that we're seeing so much in the world today is the imbalance, the misalignment that's going on because the right place of the sacred feminine has been lost. It's been taken out. And as women, energetically, we are carriers of that energy. And so the more we can honor and tend to our feminine energetics and restore it in its rightful place. Earlier you mentioned right brain, intuitive. These are associated more with the feminine. Once we can bring that back into balance, then it will also be able to support a healthy masculine. So much of the wounding I see in my partner, right, in my husband, the woundings that he carries comes from his mother line, the feminine woundings. So it's almost as if, by being in service primarily to women, the ripple effect that creates for everyone in community, right? It's not just the women who benefit. In the priestessing work that I have remembrance of doing, it was always the tending of the sacred feminine flame in order to be of service to the whole. And I see the sacred feminine, its role is primarily to be of service, like it wants to give. It's very holding, but it needs to be respected. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I also, in my own memories of past lives of being and in this lifetime being very much in service to the sacred feminine. To me, it so deeply resonates with that principle from ancient Egypt of Ma'at, that understanding not only of the creativity, the life-giving nature of the sacred feminine that we as women hold in our bodies, but also that it's about that deep understanding of everything is meant to be in right relationship with everything else, that nothing is separate. And it all is about how we come back into harmony within ourselves. How do we live in harmony with each other? How do we live in harmony with the earth and the sky? That the sacred feminine really helps us remember that it is all about that interconnectedness and being a part of that oneness. And if we violate that harmony in ourselves, if we violate that in how we interact with each other or how we interact with the earth, that ripples out and causes harm in the whole. So I think that's such a balance and a healing uh, way of correcting this path of the out of balance masculine we've been on, that's all about individuality, separation, ego, competition, and that causes such rupture and damage to ourselves and to the whole. So I think that's part of the critical healing that we're in collectively right now. And we're seeing, I think, in the world, the most extreme shadow aspects of that out of balance masculine playing out as we're moving out of the paradigms of the past and needing to heal and clear that. But we're feeling that guidance into that beauty and love and joy of the sacred feminine that is about creativity, connection, right relationship.
I really like to speak into what you just highlighted, the violation that is happening. And I really see a lot of violence as a trauma response, like violence that we take in inwards. So the negative thoughts that we have, the the kind of self-censorship that takes place even, and then in our hearts when we build armor and when we build walls, and of course in the wombs that is such a storehouse, it becomes like an energetic storage for all the woundings and traumas that we were not able to process and digest. So much of it gets stored there. So, earlier on you talked about coming into right relationship and also right balance. And so I always start with the inner, like the inner terrain and the inner landscape. So these three divine feminine centers, it's about making sure that they're all in right relationship with each other. Because so much of the time you hear people say that, oh, my heart really wants this, but my mind says otherwise. Or, they have a gut instinct that they don't trust, that they push aside, that they shut down. And all of this is actually violence that we are doing to ourselves when we don't listen, when we don't heed, and we don't trust, because we shut it down, we cut it off, right? These are very, violent words that so these acts of violence that we commit to ourselves, again, we were talking about this sense of being at peace. One of the things that I've also noticed is that there is so much nervous system dysregulation. And again, as another piece of trivia, from my Chinese lineage, I'm not sure about other traditions, but pearls are seen as medicinal. So you can either wear them and then they're absorbed into the skin, or you can crush them into powder and ingest them. So you take them in orally, and it's meant to help calm your nervous system. So if you have anxiety issues, pearl powder is often prescribed. And of course, it has beautifying effects. It is said to help a woman glow and radiate from the inside out. And it's really because of the regenerative power. Again, so much when you look at the symbolism of how a pearl is created, the kind of regenerative power that, when you alchemize and you turn something into gold, something that's very precious and beautiful, into a piece of art, even. That to me is also the alchemical power of the divine feminine, to be able to create, to turn something into beauty, into art. So much of the priestess path is the beauty way. And it's because there is something, when we appreciate beauty, we sense an innate truth that there's something right about it. So that felt like a little tangent away, but I do get quite caught up with the poetics of the symbolism. So I just wanted to share that.
I love your weaving in that whole importance of beauty because I think that that is when we come back into balance and we heal and we reintegrate that energy of the sacred feminine, then we not only are in harmony and in balance within ourselves, but then we emanate that out. And then we are able to be in our creativity in a way that's emanating joy, love, beauty, that expression of creativity that is our unique expression as a fractal part of cosmic consciousness. And it fosters joy, beauty, love, harmony.
Oh, yes. And one of the beautiful things about facilitating sacred circles is to see every woman light up in her beauty. And, we talked about feminine woundings. There's just so much toxic comparison and competition. And so a lot of women feel that they have to dim their light or to hide who they truly are in order to fit in or belong, in order to have things be in harmony. They don't want to rock the boat. Some people call it the tall poppy syndrome, and they just don't want to stand out. But when they have an experience of seeing and witnessing each woman in her unique beauty, shining her unique gifts, and realizing that that doesn't take anything away from themselves, that if anything, it inspires them to step up and shine as well, right? That is the kind of healthy relationships that can take place that we don't see often in the world or even in many communities that we tend to interface with. So having sacred spaces where you can entrain, you can experience, and then feel the nervous system regulation to feel safe to do that. That is so valuable and important. And I think a lot of the work that you and I do have that in mind. Like we can see the importance of that. Yeah.
Part of what I think is significant about that and why that healing is so important is so many of the women that I do astrological readings with are caught in some of that constriction and fear because, and you can see the themes of this in their charts, because of past life trauma in this patriarchal period of trying to be aligning with and emanating those energies of the sacred feminine and being persecuted for that. So I think part of, and again, we're all men and women healing those wounds that have affected our sense of self and healing the devaluation of the sacred feminine that's in each of us. But I think for many women who've held that ancient sacred wisdom in past lives and been persecuted for it, that part of the healing is coming into that awareness that it's safe now. And I think we can hold that stress in our bodies and in our nervous systems from past life trauma as well as current life trauma. And as you said earlier, so many of us, and I think this is a huge theme in this transition time that we're in, are needing to heal the ancestral trauma of how
Mm.
these wounds have passed down generation after generation. And if we don't bring them into awareness and heal them, then we get caught unconsciously still living out that trauma and passing it on to the next generation.
Yeah, and when it comes to ancestral trauma and healing it, so much of that takes place when you're in a field. So you don't necessarily have to do it alone by yourself. It's like when you are in a safe circle of women, the energy and the field that's created helps because we're all connected. We're all family in a literal sense. So when we come into coherence, so much takes place without you even being conscious or aware of it. And then we start to see the effects of it shortly down the road. And we go, oh, but I didn't necessarily do anything from the mind perspective, but something was definitely happening on an energetic level. So I've seen that time and time again. What tends to happen, speaking to the kind of wounding, persecution wounds from past lives that so many women have faced, I see it like, if I would bring in the metaphor of treasure again, it's like there's all this buried treasure that a lot of times we have buried because we were afraid. It didn't feel safe to bring it to light. Because the kind of looting or stealing that takes place, or the violence that's committed. Um, but it's always been there. And it's almost as if so much of the time we have forgotten. But there is now an awakening that's taking place. More and more people are remembering, coming back into a remembrance of the treasure that they hold. So how do you unlock? What is the key to bringing that back up again and really owning and claiming it? I think that really is the transition from moving away from survival, a lot of the healing and the processing, and now how do we step into our unique creative path? How do we take all the good healing work that we've done and the medicine that we now have to share? How do we bring it forth and share that with the world? And it's very much, I see it as a reciprocal exchange. Whatever I'm doing it for myself. And I also get to be in service. That to me is also very much of the sacred feminine flow that I see and experience. Earlier on, we're talking about synchronicities and my personal journey. And then I also see in the work that I do, the women that I hold space for. And then I see it ripple onto the collective as well. And then it comes back to me. So it's a beautiful spiral, very beautiful weaving and flow that takes place when we can each claim the treasure that we have inside.
Mm, that is so beautiful. And I love your description of it as a spiral journey. And as you know, so much of my work is working that path of the medicine wheel and working that spiral healing journey to eventually come to center where we're in full alignment with our soul self, with the earth and sky, and then that treasure, that unique beauty and gifts and energy that's ours to share arises out of that alignment. And part of what I feel is important, and I think you're doing this in your sacred circle work as well, is reclaiming that deeper understanding of the sacred feminine. Because I think coming out of this patriarchal period that we've been in, where we've all gotten out of balance, we've had these false notions of what it means to be in the feminine energy. In the patriarchal period, it's how do you suppress yourself to be of service to those in power? And then there's the reaction to that, which is let's align with the energies of the masculine so that we feel equal. And from my perspective, the deeper meaning of that sacred feminine energy relates to the aspects of the sacred feminine that I was taught by a Mohawk medicine woman that is about honoring that nurturing aspect of ourselves. You could call it the nurturing mother, whether you're a biological mother or not. rainbow woman, how do you be in the beauty and creative expression that's unique to you? But how do you integrate it also with the other aspects of the medicine wheel and those axes, which are opposite nurturing mother is death mother? When do we say no? Set boundaries. Say, this is destructive. No, I won't participate in that. And wild woman, how do we dare to be in our truth of who we are, whether it's causing disruption around us or not, because we dare to be in our truth? I see that as very much the energy of Eris Xena, daring to follow our own unique path. So, how do
I
we
love
all those aspects of ourselves?
I love what you're saying here because you're talking about really a core missing piece of the work in a lot of what's out there with regards to the sacred feminine idea of boundaries and how do we stand in our truth and our power, especially when there's pushback.
Yeah.
So earlier on, I spoke about excavate and elevate. And then the final piece that I share in Treasure is equilibrate. And that's about coming back into equilibrium. How do you come back to center when you're shaken by pushback, by people who react negatively to you stepping up and shining your light? How do you do it in a way that isn't defensive? How do you stay in that frequency of love and still hold your power? That is something that I find has been a missing piece. It's something I struggled with, and therefore I felt it was really important to bring that into Treasure, because a lot of the times people have amazing experiences, right? Spiritual awakenings, etc. But how do you maintain that and remain in a state of what I call divine equilibrium? That's really when the rubber meets the road. That's the daily kind of practice that's needed when we encounter turbulence. How do we speak our truth, right? And when you mentioned Arizina, we had a whole conversation about this. The energy and the archetype of a healthy, um, it's not the distorted version of that myth where she came and she caused discord, right? We're not talking about that. But the healthy expression is to come in and bring back into balance, to restore, and to do so in a very assertive, not aggressive, but healthy, feminine way. That it's not about separation, but it is about connection and saying that I belong, my truth matters, and it is here to stay. So that I feel, again, when we look at the archetypes of, wild woman, etc., or the warrioress, there have been so many distortions, as you've put it, that have downplayed and tried to suppress these strong archetypes by putting them down as negative. I have so many women coming to me and say, oh, that's scary. Oh, it's too fierce. It's too much, right? And so we have to heal that wound as well, which is a very important piece.
Which is really breaking free of the cultural pressures, often the family expectations of who we should be to really, again, align with our true selves. And with
Yeah. Mm. That really speaks to me on a very personal level because, as you know, in my own family of origin, there was so much shutting down of that. So this has been really a very personal journey of mine where I didn't believe I had gifts to share. My mom would used to laughingly joke that she picked me up from the rubbish bin. So I felt that I was trash, essentially. I didn't see myself as treasure at all. And so it took a whole journey of healing that feminine wound and seeing myself as having something that's precious to offer, to give to the world, that I am a gift instead of, oh, just a random um,
wow. Wow.
or a random piece that was discarded and then picked up, right? So when you talked about like how so much of it has to do with family and culture, conditioning and all that, it speaks to me a lot something that I feel very, very strongly and deeply about because a lot of women had probably felt less than. I mean, I can't remember the number of conversations I've had with women who would share that, as the daughter in the family, they were not they were not seen as of value as compared to, say, their brothers or their male cousins. I see this time and time again, coming from my traditional Chinese background. I've seen that as well. So, and I'm sure it's actually universal. It's not just unique to my culture, and my family. So I feel that again, so many women, in very subtle ways, sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not so subtle, they don't really value and own their worth. And perhaps they see their role as a wife, a mother, a daughter, rather than their whole selves.
What's so painful in what you're describing is how often in this patriarchal period, the devaluation and suppression of women has been passed down through the mother line.
Mm.
And, I know in my own experience, my mother, my mother's mother, they were highly intelligent, creative women who felt like they had to conform and constrict themselves to be in this role of wife and mother and not able to be in the full expression of themselves. And they carried a lot of anger and resentment about that.
Mm.
And I was the one daughter with two brothers who were very valued, and my role was supposed to be follow the path of being a caretaker, and as I was breaking free from that and saying, but I want to be in my true self. I could feel how my mother and grandmother were really resisting that because it was pushing up against their own wounds and frustrations of, well, if I haven't been able to step into my creativity, how dare you? I mean, all unconsciously played out. But I think that's a way these wounds can just keep getting perpetuated. And when we really reclaim our true selves and that valuing of ourselves and self love, then we emanate that out and really support the healing and clearing of those wounds for ourselves as women, but also for men to be embracing that sacred feminine within themselves.
Absolutely. When the way I see it is that when every woman can see themselves as a precious pearl, right, a prize beyond compare, not in an entitled or arrogant way, it's there is no separation because we're each unique and beautiful. And that is such a great wounding where we don't feel that way and we either put somebody else on a pedestal or we feel toxic envy and we're not able to express it. And so it builds, and the resentment and the envy, what you shared about your experience with your mother and grandmother, right? The envy, the bitterness, the resentment, these are all wounds.
Yeah.
And it's very much like that irritant, that grit I was talking about in the oyster. Do we let that destroy us and eat us from the inside out? Or do we transmute and alchemize that into
Mm.
something that ends up being a real treasure? It's it's a choice point. We get to choose, right? We know that it's their generational patterns and the woundings, but we get to be the cycle breakers. We get to make the change, and that will impact future generations to come, to the people who come into interaction with us, and on a wider scale, the global collective. So, yeah, this feels really
Beautiful.
cool to talk about.
Beautiful. And again, we're circling back to that theme as we heal, then we support the healing of the world. And that is so critical in this time that we're in globally. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the way in which you're walking your talk and that you've been living this journey of healing, transmutation, stepping into the full treasure of who you are. And say a little bit about how people can connect with you and find out more about this program that you're offering.
Well, my website is journeys with an S.com. And I think I'll give you the link that you can share for for treasure, which begins on October 10th. So that's the 1010 portal. And I really see that as, so much of the time we receive a validation that is external. Someone gives us a grade. Coming from my educational background, it's almost like, oh, how good are you? We get that, we source it to an external authority. Earlier on, you were sharing about how you were placed in the role of being the caregiver. And so much of the time, a lot of women, their value has been placed on how much they can offer and give. But when we can give ourselves and say, I deserve a 10 out of 10, that's when the true healing occurs, when we can say that fully, honestly, and really claim that. So that's why I selected that date. Again, very symbolic and very energetically aligned. Yeah, so they can learn more by clicking on the link that you'll be sharing. And if it resonates, I'd love for them to sign up for the program.
Beautiful. Thank you for the beautiful work that you're doing and for the way in which you are modeling that path and emanating that energy into the world. And blessings to you on this transition that you're in as you make this major move from Thailand to Europe.
Mm. Thank you. And thank you for having this conversation with me.
And thank you to all of you in this community for the ways in which we are in this sacred community together, supporting each other in healing, transforming, and coming into our true selves to support the healing of the world. Blessings and love to all of you.